Hi everyone, today we're going to take a look on how we can use AWS S3 as a file storage option with the Rails backend app. We are also going to take a look on how we can privately store these files so they can only be accessed with our credentials, and how we can add to the URL of the file a token and an expiration date for the token. So for this video, I already have created a very simple basic Rails app which only has one controller, which is also the root of this project, and only returns a JSON with this content. Next, in order to actually go forward with the S3 management part, we will need to create a bucket. Here we will need to create a bucket name. Everyone that already is accustomed with AWS will go pretty fast through this, but I will try to explain why we choose some of these things. So first, bucket name. We need something here to be globally unique. So probably we can just go with the name bucket because someone has probably already used it. So in our case, I just choose presigned S3 Wolfpack uploader. You can freely change this. You can't freely change this, but you can delete it and create it and migrate these files in case you do want to change this name. Don't worry, this won't appear anywhere for your users, it's just for your internal management. Next, for the region part, you can choose here regions. For example, if you know most of your clients are in Europe, you would probably want, and also your server is in Europe, you will probably want this to be deployed in the same region. So I will just go with Frankfurt here. In the object ownership part, ACLs are basically who has access to your project. So what we want here is to enable it, because we are a multi-user team. Objects in this bucket can be owned by other accounts. So for example, someone else can create files or can create folders in this bucket. And we are also going to tick here, if an object is written by another user, that user will be the owner of the object. Next is the public access setting. So this is what I've been talking about at the start of the video. This is if we let this ticked, we can only access this using our credentials. Otherwise, anyone can see the files that are in our bucket if they already have a link to it, for example, or stuff like that. So for the sake of this video, I will leave this ticked. If you don't mind about people actually seeing images, publicly accessing your images, you can untick this, and you can go through each setting to see how this works. Next, we're going to disable versioning for the sake of simplicity. We are also going to ignore some tags. On the encryption side, we are not going to change anything. And also on the advanced settings is just object lock, which we are also going to ignore. So we created our bucket. Then in the list of all our buckets, we can just go filter by our preferred bucket and choose it. And here we can see the settings that we have selected before. So in order to give access to our backend to this bucket, we will actually need to create a user that has access to it. I recommend doing this with AWS IAM. This is actually allowing you to create a user that doesn't need to have a login, doesn't need to have two-factor authentication or anything behind it. It's just a user instance, some user credentials that will have access to S3. In this case, for example, if I delete my account or something like that, or need to change credentials, they won't be lost in the project, or they won't need to be changed in the project. So we're going to go to IAM, we're going to go to the users setting, and we're going to create a new user. Here, our user can be called S3 full access. This user will have access to all of S3 because this is the settings that we're going to give it to him. Also, the credential type in our case will be access key. If we want the user to be able to log in through the console, then we're going to give also the password setting here, but that's not the case, as I mentioned a little bit before. Next, in the permissions part, we are going to copy we're going to attach existing policies directly. So AWS does a great job here to just have predefined settings here. So basically we can just select the full access setting here, and we can move on to tags. We can completely ignore tags again, and then we make sure that the username and the policies are correct as we want them to be. Okay, so we created the user, and then we will need the access key ID. We just need to save this somewhere, and the secret access key. We also need to save this. Be careful, you can easily see these after them. So let's go to IAM again, search for the user. And just go to security credentials. You cannot see them again. So basically you will need to create another access key. The access key ID you can see, but the secret you can't. So you will basically need to create another one in case you didn't know this down. Good. So now we basically have all the parameters that we need to set up the S3 access into our backend. So we need four parameters. Here is a small typo. It's EU central one. The bucket name, in my case, it's the presigned S3 Wolfpack uploader. The access key ID will be the user, the IAM user access key that we just generated, and the secret will be the same that I have shown before. Good. So now we basically have the environment variables that we need in order to access the S3 bucket here. So what we will need to do further on is to add the AWS SDK S3 in order to the gem in order to access the APIs that actually allow us to do some S3 operations here. I recommend taking the latest version from Ruby gems. This will of course help a lot with keeping things up to date. And then we're just gonna make sure that everything is installed. Great. Also, you will need an uploader. So now you have the S3 bucket where things will be stored, but you will also need an uploader. So Rails cannot just by itself upload photos to S3. It will need an uploader, which will handle the stored directory, the caching, the thumbnailing, and everything else. For this, I will choose Carrierwave, but you can easily choose Active Storage if you like. There are also some other options. So I just chose Carrierwave because this will be very fast to go through, but there are other options. So keep this in mind. This won't change necessarily the AWS settings. Good. Let's also install these. Awesome. So now that we actually have the AWS SDK S3 and Carrierwave, we can just start coding. So the first thing that I would like to do is create a model that will actually have the profile image. Let's call it user, and we'll have a profile image, which is important to be a string. So when we will do Carrierwave matching with the stuff that's the attachment that's going to be stored in the database, this type will be a string. Everything looks great. So the next thing that we need to do is to just create an initializer for Carrierwave to make sure that the uploader and S3 are matched together. So we will go to config, initializers, and create a new file. I'm gonna call it Carrierwave. You can call it whatever you want. So the first thing that we're gonna do is configure Carrierwave. So what you want to do here is to actually mention the storage, the bucket, the credentials, and everything else that we need here. The storage in our case will be, of course, AWS. The AWS bucket, we can take that value from the environment variable that we have just set earlier. Here, if you have multiple buckets for each environment, then you can easily use the environment variable as I have. Otherwise, if you have the same bucket for each environment, you don't actually need that in environment variables. This is not necessarily a sensitive secret, so you can just put it here. Then it's a really important part is the ACL. This is basically the object ownership that I have talked before when we set up the bucket. So in our case, we will put it to private. It's really important for this to match the private settings that we have set when creating the bucket. Because, for example, if we will put here public read only or public read write, it will not work unless the private settings are the same on the bucket. So if we have used private, we will also have to use private here. Then we will just need to create the config for AWS credentials. So I will do this now. This is an object, a hash. We will need access key ID. I have a small typo here. Access key ID. Then we'll have a secret access key. And we'll also have the region. The good thing here is that we can take all three of these from an environment variable. So I'm just gonna copy paste everything here. So right now we should be able to upload any file into the S3 bucket after of course we create the uploader. But the thing is that we will not have that token part and that expiration part. So also in the AWS credentials, we will want to add another parameter called signature version. As far as I know right now we are at signature version 4. So we are going to use this. When you're trying to put it up in your own project, please check the documentation and make sure you're also on the latest version, because this will be pretty important also for the security part. And we will also want to add the the default authenticated expiration, which in our case will be 10 minutes. So now we have configured Carrierwave to know about the S3 bucket and to upload files in S3 bucket. So the next thing that we would like to do is to make sure that we have an uploader to mount to the profile image parameter or attribute in our model. So here we will mount uploader, and let's call it image uploader. This is a file that we don't have already. So we would go in app, we can create another, let's say, folder called uploaders. You can also do it in other folders that you want, like in services. But I usually like to create a separate folder for this because it's going to be easier for us to filter them out. And I'm going to call it image uploader, just like the class mentioned here. Good. So our class image uploader will obviously inherit for the base uploader from Carrierwave. In case you're using active storage, you're going to inherit from the active storage uploader. Here I have a small typo. Okay, good. Now, in case you want to do some image modifications, for example, resizing, having it black and white and so on, you can do that by importing MiniMagick. And MiniMagick is a pretty powerful tool that lets you to do some image adjustments. I will just put it here for you to know that you can easily use this. You can also use RMagick or any other gem that you know how to use with image processing, but I'm not going to use it for the sake of simplicity now. But for our use case, we are going to actually need 2 more methods. The first one would be the allow list for extensions. This will actually let know our uploader that we only allow some extensions. For example, I don't want to allow PDFs, I don't want to allow WebP, I just want to allow JPEGs and PNGs. The second method that I actually need is the store directory. So even though we upload images into S3, we would like to filter them a little bit. So in case this is left empty, each image will be just put into the S3 base folder with their name. But in case we have two files with the same name, that gets a little bit more complicated. In case users upload their images with their file name, and we are actually gonna keep that, it's gonna be a little bit messy to know which file is for which model. So I'm gonna create a string here. This will also create the folders for you into S3. That will actually let us know where to put the file. I'm also gonna take the model, which in my case is gonna be user. So in S3, I'm actually gonna have uploads / user / model ID. In my case, the user's ID. So when people upload one.png multiple times, I'm gonna know which user uploaded one.png. Good. This is everything that I need for the uploader. I can also set here a thumbnail. If I want, I can also set here a bigger size, medium size, and so on. If you want to do some image processing to only show some images on mobile, but bigger images on the website, you can easily do that here. Okay, now that we have everything set up, I think it's time for us to test. The first thing that I would like to do is to take an image. I can take any image basically, and I'm just gonna put it in the temporary folder. I'm just gonna put a circle here. The reason is I want to test uploading this image into my file. Good. Then I'm gonna go into my Rails console. I'm actually gonna set the file path to config. No, it's not config. It's temporary /webcam circle.png. Good. And I'm also gonna create a user. So I do get an error here. It seems like I don't have Carrierwave uploader. Let me see if I have a typo here. I do, because Carrierwave is with an uppercase W. Okay, so let's try this again, if I don't do any more typos. So let's define the file path. Let's create a new user. Okay, so I did create the model, but I of course didn't migrate the database. Okay, so now I do have a user instance, and I do want to update it with having the so I do want to have profile image equals file path, but file.open file path. Okay, so now I'm also gonna save the user, and when we go to user last profile image, we're gonna see that we have an image uploader instance here. We can also go and see a URL. This is the image that we can access. We can open it. We can see here. Now, what's really important about this URL is that it does have the tokens set up. You can see here that just with this, it should probably be an image, but then we have some more parameters. The algorithm setup, the actual credential, which also includes the region. It also has the date that actually this URL was created at. It does have a second timer in which the URL will expire, and it also has a signature. Without this, we cannot actually see the file. So if I just put this here, I'm gonna get access denied. In case I do want to go to the bucket and see all of my my images, I can go to the bucket, go to objects. I will need to refresh this, and then I can see the folder uploads, user, because this is the model, the ID, and then I can see all the images that were uploaded for user with ID 1. Here I can actually see the image, and of course the object URL cannot be accessed without the actual parameters here. So that was it. I can also let you know a little bit about another security measure that you can take for your image uploader. So AWS does have an API gateway called CloudFront. In case your server is also deployed to AWS and does use CloudFront, it's a great idea to also make sure that your files are only accessible through CloudFront, through that API gateway. So basically, even if someone does call your API, in case it does not come from CloudFront, it will not be actually accessed. So that's been it. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.